Hey everybody, it's Mark Finkelpearl, and this is Geoffrey Himes. And we're
Hi,
back.
hi, everybody, and welcome to Hard Rain and Pink Cadillacs. This is our second podcast episode, and we've had a great reaction to the first one.
Yeah,
Mark,
we want to thank everybody for liking and subscribing, for reading, for leaving comments. Please keep it up. We've gotten reactions not only on Substack, but also on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and on Facebook. We love it. We thank you for all the support. We're going to talk about Springsteen for a little while, specifically tracks to the new box set. And there's a lot to unpack here. But Jeff, why don't we start with the big picture? You wrote a book about Springsteen. It's still in print, it's available wherever you buy books. Tell us about that and tell us about how we should begin to think about whether tracks two is something we want to invest in. It's, I think, $3.99. Not a cheap record to buy, not a cheap box set.
Mhm.
Should people buy it? Well,
Well,
maybe they should. What do you think?
there's it's a mixed bag, to be honest. There's some great stuff in it, and there's some very disposable stuff on it. My book that Mark was referring to is part of the 33 and a third series, a series of books where each book is about one particular album. And my book was about Born in the USA. I took a very broad approach to it where I sort of discuss all the music that he wrote between The River and Tunnel of Love that he was sort of up for consideration for what became Born in the USA, and talked about, why there was this outpouring, why he made the choices he did, why Nebraska was sectioned off into its own album, and then why he settled on the Born in the USA. And one of the things, if you listen to all that music, much of which has been bootlegged, and much of which is now available um, on his greatest hits album or on Tracks One, the box set that came out uh, a while ago, and then some more of it's coming out on this new collection. And there's a wealth of material. There's some absolutely great songs that have not been widely heard, and there's some more great songs on this collection that have not been widely heard or even bootlegged, some of them. So this box set is called Lost Albums. And unlike the first box set, which was like outtakes and alternate takes from his mid-period albums, this one is contains six albums that he almost released as albums. He thought of them as cohesive units, and for whatever reason decided not to release them at a certain point. And then there's a seventh album that collects some odds and ends that he's had hanging around that he wanted to get out. So one thing that we should talk about, Mark, is why is it different to think about music in terms of albums rather than individual tracks? Springsteen is a very strong advocate for the album listening approach to popular music. And that's why, you know, this box set is separated into these individual albums. Um, but he claims that when albums when songs are recorded and written at the same in the same time period, they about similar themes with a similar sort of sound, that they inform each other in a way that makes the sum greater than the parts. How do you think about it?
Well, I think about it that way as well. Look, I think that this is a real differentiator because most, whether it's Bob Dylan or Neil Young, most of these legendary artists are releasing their archives, and they do, in many ways, amount to just a bunch of tracks that didn't make it, alternative takes. That's
Mhm.
really not what we have here. Springsteen is really putting stake in the ground and saying, look, these are fully realized, fully mixed records that just didn't make it for whatever reason. And I think the question, as you have put it, is really interesting. Does this add? Is this additive to his legend? and his body of work, or is it superfluous?
Right. And I think that on all these albums, in my opinion, there's, a handful of tracks that are as good as anything he's written. And there's a lot of filler as well. Um, and so, if you're a Spotify listener, you go through and pick out tracks. I've, in fact, have created a Spotify playlist called Hard Rain and Pink Cadillacs, the best of Bruce Springsteen's lost albums. So you'll be able to you can find on Spotify now. Um, but the only one that I think really works as an album is the one that's called Somewhere North of Nashville, which he was recording at the same time as The Ghost of Tom Joad. And they would record the North of Nashville tracks in the daytime, take a dinner break, and in the evening they would do this sort of slower, darker songs from Ghost of Tom Joad, sometimes by candlelight even. Uh, so there were two very different kinds of music at the same time, the same day. I think he eventually decided that Ghost of Tom Joad was a stronger album, and he released that and kept North of Nashville in the can. I happen to believe he made the wrong decision. I think that the Somewhere North of Nashville is one of his great albums. In the press, it's been discussed as his country album, which is not really accurate. It's not country. It's sort of Sun Records rockabilly in the style of Elvis Presley, Jerry Lee Lewis, and Roy Orbison. And this has some of his fastest, funniest songs he ever wrote. And it's got the only real cover version on this whole box set is this cover of Johnny Rivers' Poor Side of Town, which is a great song. And Bruce does a very sort of slower, more conversational version of it that's very effective. Uh, so, if and when Columbia decides to release these albums individually, which they may well do in time for Christmas, that's the one I would get. But just the Faithless album, which is a soundtrack
Oh, wait,
for
let me just jump in before we move to Faithless.
yeah.
I want to agree with you. I think Nashville is a great record. Songs like Poor Side of Town, but also Repo Man, Stand on It. There's some great tracks there. The thing that really struck me in listening to North Side of Nashville, Somewhere North of Nashville, is the pedal steel. You're talking about a band that in 1999, when the East Street Band formed again, really stuck their stake in the ground as a guitar band by
Mm-hmm.
bringing Steve Van Zandt back in, adding him into the mix again with Niels Lofgren, who had been with the band since 1984. And they're a guitar army, right? Those three guys. Here, there's a real move in a very pronounced way to saying this is a pedal steel record
Mm-hmm.
in many ways. And that to me is something that makes Somewhere North of Nashville stand out. But you were moving on to something else.
Well,
Which album?
I would agree with you. I think it's also very much a piano record. There's that sort of Jerry Lee Lewis, pounding triplets through a lot of these songs. And, Repo Man and about this guy is cruising around town looking for cars
Yeah,
that are,
great
you know,
track.
past due on their
Yeah,
payment that he can like snatch and take back to
yeah,
the impoundment lot. It's hilarious. And it's just like goes full tilt from start to finish.
yeah.
And Detail Man is about an auto mechanic who's, shows the same detail. It's attention to detail with the women that he loves that he does to the cars that he
Similar track. They're
remodels.
kind of two sides of one coin, those two songs, Detail
And
Man and Repo Man.
and they're both car songs, which is
Yeah.
a continuing theme for Springsteen. So yeah, it's all great stuff. Um, so the the one thing that happened is that he made Nebraska on this 4-track TEAC, and mostly with just voice and guitar, some little uh, additional effects and flavors. and he caught lightning in a bottle. It was,
Yeah.
it's a great
Yeah.
record. He went and recorded most of those songs with the E Street Band to see if they would work with the Born USA stuff, and the TIAC versions were just better. So, and it stands up as a really great record. But this gave him the idea that he could do more of this kind of stuff. And uh, the LA Garage album, which is the first disc on this box set, is him in a garage above, in a home studio above a garage in Los Angeles, uh, working on more sort of 4-track and 8-track kind of recordings, mostly by himself, but with some help. And he fell in love with synthesizers, uh, which was understandable. This is the early 80s,
Sure. Yeah. Technology
synthesizer.
was really getting better
Yeah,
in that
it was
department.
in popular music, synthesizers were taking over. And the problem for me, for my ears, is that what's really ironic is that the guitar tracks on this box set don't sound dated at all, but the synthesizer tracks do, which is sort of counterintuitive. But
Yeah.
that sort of whiny, 80s synth sound, um, it's just sort of sticks out like a sore thumb in a lot of the songs, and sort of dampens the impact of a lot of really great songs, I think.
Yeah. Look, I think this is the first one of the box set that I listened to,
Mhm.
and I was disappointed. And when I heard it, I thought, well, is this whole thing going to be disappointing? Now that is not the case. It's a great box set, really, in many ways. But LA Garage Sessions 83, to me, does not elevate that era. You said it, right? Nebraska, many people consider that to be his best record ever.
Mhm.
It's a record in which he helped further Americana as a genre. 2 years later, Born in the USA is something that put him into football stadiums,
Mhm.
50,000 seat arenas. We all know how Nebraska has held up. Books have been written about it. Warren Zane's book is now being turned into a movie starring Jeremy Allen White. And I don't think LA Garage Sessions, you know, Bruce and his manager, John Landau, got it right the first time, right? They decided we're going to release Nebraska the way it is, and then Born in the USA, from the song selection to the track listing, is a great, great, important record. And I just don't think LA Garage elevates that.
But on the other hand, I think that the LA Garage Sessions has some songs that are some of the best songs he wrote during this period, and that haven't really been available in any other form. And if he had worked them up with the E Street Band or with, in some way, they could have been, amazing tracks. I'm thinking, well, Sugarland, which is probably one of the best Family Farm songs out of all the hundreds of Family Farm songs that were written during that period. It's just extremely well written, and he did it. He did it live on the Born USA tour several times, and that's just a great record. There's 3 songs in that album, the box set, are basically the same song that he wrote 2 or 3 different ways. So
Hmm.
like,
Yeah.
the first 2 verses will be the same, and then it'll veer off in one direction in the third verse in one version, and veer off in a different direction in the third verse of another version. And it's a fascinating window into his songwriting process. But I think that those 3 songs, Black Mountain Ballad, County Fair, um, Fugitive Stream, the ballad version, those are my favorite versions of those 3 songs. Those are great songs, and the fact that we now have them is a gift. And you know, one can imagine how they could have been uh, arranged better. So,
Look, I take your point. I feel like if you judge great, yeah, right. You know, what is great? What is a great record? A great record is a record that stands up to repeat
Mhm, mhm.
listenings and that you can hear again and again and again over a long period of time, over your lifetime, and still get something out of it. Is LA Garage 83 something I'm going to come back to again and again? And maybe instead of Nebraska or instead of putting on Born in the USA? For me, no, it's just not.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there's a difference also between great songs and great records. You know, you can
Agreed.
if you
Yeah. And
recognize
that's
it,
part of this mixed bag
right? Yeah.
for
So I'm
sure.
saying, you know, just to have, you know, a dozen or so great songs that we've never heard before is an important uh,
Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
gift for us, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that so in the second disc in the box is called the Streets of Philadelphia Sessions, and many of you probably remember he was asked to write a song for the Tom Hanks movie about AIDS, about a guy coming down with AIDS, and how tragic that was. And he wrote the title track of the movie, which is a very moving ballad, and won an Oscar for best song in a movie that year. And and so but he did it with sort of using drum loops and synthesizers as sort of the foundations for this song. And I don't think that's necessarily the best version of that song that was in the movie, but it's a great song. And he used the same sort of approach for like for the 10 other songs, 11 other songs. Uh, and the as I was talking earlier, you know, it's like this his use the way he uses drum machines and synthesizers sounds dated in a way that Prince's work from the same era does not sound dated. And that's because, you know, for Prince, he got synthesizers and how to use them. And I don't think Springsteen did.
Hmm.
Um, and so, you know, and again, that's a record that has some good songs that are never quite reach their potential because of the
Yeah.
arrangements. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I feel I agree with you. I think the Streets of Philly album on this new box set it is a moment in time. It's an important moment in time culturally in that, you know, AIDS and AIDS patients and people suffering from AIDS were still largely unseen.
mhm.
And we, as a culture, we were not facing up to it. And I think that, you know, Springsteen helped put a mirror up to that. So the record has a certain vibe, and it's not a happy, yeah, somewhere north of Nashville vibe that's jumping, right? It's a vibe that really is reflective of that era, but it belongs here, certainly, and it's a good thing that they released it.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's that song, "The Little Things," where he's this this woman says, "Why don't you stay the night? We can like sleep together. We'll keep our clothes on. Nothing has to happen." And then
Yeah.
little by little, she
Yeah.
gets his clothes off. It's very witty. It's very realistic about a certain kind of beginning of a relationship.
That's
Uh,
another thing to point out is that almost every Bruce is represented in this box set, right? The
uh,
Bruce you're just talking about there is sort of the romantic, you know, the guy who is always trying to figure out how to be the best partner, how to be the
mm,
best lover. There's also the sort of fire and brimstone Bruce is represented here. He's a guy who sort of emerged really, in my mind, in 1999 when the E Street Band formed again, and Bruce would do these long raps in the concerts about the redemption, the redemptive power of rock and roll. And you know, you've got the westward facing Bruce in this box set. You
Hmm.
know, people obviously for good reason associate him with New Jersey and with the Jersey Shore, but Bruce has had a long relationship with the West, beginning when his parents moved there when he was 19, and he decided not to go. Later on in the 80s, he bought a home there, and in the 90s, in Los Angeles, he lived there for quite a long time and started raising his family there. All of these Bruces are here, and you get a sense of them and others. You get the crooner
Hmm.
Bruce in this box set, right? The guy like, remember when Bob Dylan decided to do a couple of albums of Sinatra covers, and
Right.
you know, and he's going to be a crooner. Well, that Bruce is here too in ways. So you know, there's all different facets of Bruce Springsteen represented.
Yeah, I mean, you raise a good point too, is that it's important to keep in mind that during this period we're talking about, which is like the 90s and aughts and teens here, is that no matter whether the records he was making were good or not, he was always putting on great shows. I mean,
Yeah,
consistently, the shows were always great, even if the latest record wasn't. And, like the Rolling Stones sort of syndrome. Um,
yeah, yeah, right.
so the next disc is called Faithless, which was written for a movie that is described as a quote spiritual western. Not much more information is available about it, except that it's been in there's a script but there's never been any footage shot yet, and it's one of those movies that's in Hollywood limbo forever. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
and this is my least favorite disc of the set. It's sort of this the songwriting is rather vague and vaporous. The music is sort of vaporous. It's sort of like mood music rather than storytelling, and uh, it didn't appeal to me. I don't know what you thought of it.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I disagree a little bit in so much as that's the whole point, right?
Hmm.
When you're doing a movie soundtrack and you've been commissioned to do that, as he was here, you're not creating. You're creating something impressionistic. You're creating something moody because movie soundtracks are meant to accentuate and highlight the drama. Now, the problem is we don't know what the drama is because we don't have a movie to go with it. And that's an issue. But I think this is this is again, it's a vibe record. It's an interesting atmosphere. What's the atmosphere? Maybe this is the kind of record you put on a rainy Sunday morning when it's just you and your coffee and a croissant and the Sunday paper,
Mm.
right? And it's sort of, it's not music that you need to focus on because you're right, it's not really Springsteen songs. It's much more atmospheric than that, much more impressionistic
Yeah,
than
yeah,
we're used to Bruce being a rock and roller,
right.
and he's not Wilco, he's not
Mm.
Radiohead, he's not TV on the radio. This is much more impressionistic.
Yeah, there are actually four instrumentals and like 7 or 8 vocal tracks on it. But you know, the question for any soundtrack music is, can it stand on its own as an album to be heard detached from the movie? And there's a few that are, but most of them don't. And I think this is one that falls into that doesn't really stand on its own
You're right. There's
category.
not even a movie for it to fall back on
Right.
to elevate. There's no movie that exists, and so it's interesting. It's in a class by itself. But I
Right.
I largely agree with you. I do
Right.
think that it's not a record you're going to come back to again and again in this box set, but it is a mood piece if you're in the right mood.
And then the next record is Somewhere North of Nashville, which we've discussed already. Um, I'll just say that, it has these great rockabilly songs. It has some really nice ballads. Silver Mountain is kind of a cowboy folk ballad that actually works really well. So again, that's my favorite one on the
Yeah,
thing. And
yeah,
Inyo is named after Inyo County in California, where Springsteen uh, used to take long motorcycle rides, and he would write these songs when he was out on his bike in this desert country. And the songs themselves are about the the border culture, so Mexican and American, interacting, people whose lives begin in Mexico and end in America, or they want to get to America, or they wish they could go back home. Um, and what's curious to me about this is that the the language is really rich, and the characters are rich, and the descriptions are rich, but the music is very minimal. The rhyming is, hit and miss, and um, the meter is sort of suspended, so he can like go on. And so they almost become like almost, but not quite. They almost become like spoken prose pieces. And to me, it doesn't really work as popular song. So
Yeah, again, I agree with you. I do like it. It's a record that I think I could listen to more than a couple of times. I really believe, as we mentioned earlier, Bruce has a lot to say. He has just as much to say about the American West as he does about the New Jersey Turnpike. And this is a cohesive, has a real beginning, middle, and end to it. It's very thematic, very
mhm.
much about the West. But in general, to me, has a little bit of a Ghost of Tom Joad vibe to it. I'm not sure if that's the same period as Tom Joad was written. Excuse me, but I like it. It's a good
Yeah.
record. It's
I
okay.
think it I think it comes out right after he did Ghosted Tom Joad. It was sort of he saw it sort of a continuation of it. But unlike a lot of people, unlike a lot of critics, I'm not a big fan of Tom Joad. I think that the lyrics are great, but the music's sort of undernourished.
Yeah,
And, his work, really needs both. It needs the strong lyric, but it also needs that strong melody and movement. And I think that Tom Joad and Inyo both are, the music is sort of static and
yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
repetitive, not as tuneful or catchy even
yeah,
as it could be. Whereas
yeah.
north of Nashville is nothing but catchy. So
Right, right, indeed.
and humorous too. I think that this is in my book. I said that one of the reasons that I like Born in the USA more than like Darkness on the Edge of Town is that Springsteen included his funny songs as well as his serious songs.
Yeah,
So it feels like a more complete human experience. And there's
agreed.
in culture, serious songs are treated more respectfully than funny songs, even though funny songs can tell us as much about human nature as the most serious songs. So, you know, again, it, when he can balance those two, he's really working at his best.
Yeah,
Um, and so after that is what's in some ways the strangest disc on this set, which is Twilight Hours, which is he, like a lot of people, he recognizes that, the Beach Boys and Burt Bacharach and Jim Webb and Paul McCartney, who write very rich harmonic music, can be as important as Bob Dylan or John Lennon. And this album is so so indebted to Burt Bacharach that you can almost hear the models he's working from. So that Sunday Love, which is the lead out track, sounds just like God Give Me Strength, the song he did with Elvis Costello, or Late in the Evening sounds like A House Is Not a Home, um, which is a famous Bacharach David song, and Follow the Sun has the same sort of rhythmic intro as Do You Know the Way to San Jose? So it's very much a Burt Bacharach flavor, which is, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Elvis Costello likes Burt Bacharach so much that he worked with him several times. And if you really love popular music, you like a lot of different kind of styles, and he definitely wanted to scratch his itch. And I thought he in some ways he does a better job of this than uh, sort of imitating the sort of synth and drum machine music of the 90s. And you know, the chord movement is really nice. Most, but not all, the songs have really strong lyric imagery, so it's not just sumptuous sound. I think High Sierra, which is this sort of
Hmm.
outlaw song,
Right.
uh, done in this sort of big cinematic fashion. The title comes from the 1941 Humphrey Bogart movie about an outlaw up at the Sierra Mountains. And Springsteen's song has a different plot, but has the same kind of spirit as the Bogart movie. It's a great, great song, and it's beautifully done. The problem, of course, is that Bruce Springsteen, as a singer, is not Dionne Warwick. He
Right.
doesn't
Right.
have that
Right. Right.
beautiful
Right.
voice to go with his beautiful music,
Right.
but he does a respect. Let's say he does a respectable job of it, and to me, it's a B+ record, but
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
Right. 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 Look, I probably go slightly farther than you and give it a B-, but certainly not a C+. Look, I just don't come to Bruce for this kind of stuff. That's the bottom line, right? And in terms of my relationship to Backrack and David, I got it much, much later in my life because when I was a kid, my mother was listening to that stuff, and that's not the stuff I wanted to listen to, right? That was sort of mom's music. Later
Mhm.
on, you get it, you understand why it's an important part of the American songbook. I agree with you completely. Bruce is no Dionne Warwick. And I just it's just not really why I come to Bruce Springsteen. I don't need it from him. There are other places to get it. They're a little more on the nose, and again, does it belong on this set? Yeah, sure. Am I going to go back to it again and again and give it repeat listenings? Probably not.
Well, I think that uh, will be really interesting is that if the sort of adult contemporary singers tackle some of these songs, like
Yeah.
you could hear Adele
Right.
singing some of these songs like Late in the Evening or Follow the
Yeah.
Sun, and
Yeah.
it would be great to hear that. Um,
Yeah, no, you're right about that for sure.
um, and you understand this is one thing that to keep in mind about any artist is that you know it's important to keep taking artistic risks, to try things that are out of your comfort zone, to stretch a bit. But it's also important to remember that, it's not really an artistic risk unless there's a true chance that you're going to flop.
Yeah.
And I think that, these are artistic risks. And sometimes they flop,
Yep.
and sometimes they take them into new territories. I mean, obviously, Bruce as Burt Bacharach is a stretch for a lot of people. Of course, it's not that different from Western Stars, which was, I think, one of
Yeah.
his better late period albums. It's all, that's more Glenn Campbell, but it's not, it's in the same vicinity. Uh, and and whatever. Listen to High Sierra. It's just a great song.
I'll
And
go
and
back
then
and do that.
and then we come to the final album, which is not a cohesive album, never intended to be an album. It's just sort of some things and that he, had been hanging around waiting for a way to get released. And the first three songs are songs that he co-wrote with Joe Grusecki.
You're talking
And
about Perfect World now, for the record.
yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. Perfect world. And Joe Grusecki was the leader of the Iron City House Rockers, a Pittsburgh band, who had that sort of blue collar rock and roll, working man's politics kind of persona and approach that Bruce did. And the two men just really bonded uh, together, and they wrote a bunch of songs and Bruce produced an album for Joe, and it, you know, it was a connection that grew out of a shared vision and a you know, an honest friendship for one another. So, and I think those first three songs on Perfect World are great. Uh, Especially Another Thin Line, which is sort of
Yeah.
sums up
Yeah.
uh, the way that, especially now today, where the income gap is so horrendous,
Yeah.
how, if you're a working class guy or woman that, it just seems like the world's stacked across against you. The
Yeah.
stocks go up and you know, spending money seems to go down, and it's very political, but it's also very much kitchen table kind of detail.
Yeah.
Uh, and then it's more of his songs like there's a bunch of songs in this set about a marriage going sour and the narrator saying, I really did love you. I know I screwed up. I wish you would come back. And uh, they one of the best songs that is um, Rain in the River and
Yeah.
Blind Man, on
Yeah.
that Perfect World album. And
Yeah.
he just, when he gets really vague and talks about, oh, I did bad things and I wish we could be in love again. When starts using abstract nouns like that, he loses me. But when he starts talking about, I see your lipstick case lying on the sidewalk, and remember when it was on your lips, and that when it gets to that kind of detail, it really hits home, I think.
Yeah. Look, I think you're right. Perfect World is not, as you said, a cohesive record. It's more a collection of tracks. I did not prepare by reading the liner notes.
Mhm.
And so I didn't know that Joe Grushecky co-wrote these first three songs. I'm from Pittsburgh, grew
Mhm.
up, born and raised there, and I love these tracks. Now I know why I love these tracks. Um, I think I'm Not Sleeping, Idiot's Delight, Another Thin Line, fantastic songs. Can't believe they haven't been released until now. The Great Depression, another, we all know because Bruce revealed it to us in his autobiography about the battles that he's faced with his mental health. But we also can see the juxtaposition there between mental health and the economics of the world in that track. So I really like this record. This is one that I will come back to again and again. I want to learn more about it. I want to figure out what all these songs are, when they were recorded, who's on the tracks. It's a good record.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for listening to us talk about one of our favorite artists and this big new thing. Springsteen told the New York Times that the third box set, 5 album box set, is already been finished and will be coming out, either later this year or next year. So there's more to look forward to, more to think about. We will, as I said, we're posting a Spotify playlist for the 30 best songs on this box set under Hard Rain and Pink Cadillacs, which is, of course, the name of our podcast, the name of our Substack. Come visit us. We have some interviews that are coming up later this summer that we're really looking forward to. We're posting, reviews and essays every week. So, check in at the Substack site. And Mark, I think we're off to a good start here.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Thank you to everybody who's been supporting us. We really appreciate it. As Jeff said, a lot more to come with some great interviews on tap and some more content all over the place. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.